Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is a brand new Patriot TV presentation, Election Edge. We're going to carry you through the rest of the election season. Donald Trump, Vice President Harris, and a cast of three more possibly. But you're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to kick through all the polling. We're going to break it down, what it really means, who's up, who's down. And most of all, we're going to give you the straight story that you're never going to get from the mainstream media about what the actual state of the race is, unfiltered, as we go through the information. And listen, I'd like to welcome Making Sense of the Madness host Jason Bermas on our inaugural show. Jason, happy to have you with me on Election Edge.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark, and I look forward to talking about this crazy election. You thought the last one was impossible to beat, and this one, obviously, with the madness that has ensued, has beaten it in spades so far.
Well, think about it. I mean, going back 3.5 weeks, I mean, we go through an incredible, almost a month now, the just apocalyptic debate that Joe Biden had, the subsequent, trying to clean it up by Team Biden with Stephanopoulos interviews, Lester Holt interviews, the questions that were handed out to Black radio host, the trip to Vegas. I mean, none of it was working. Everybody on the Democratic side saw it wasn't working. Everyone with half a brain knew that after that debate performance, he eventually was going to be replaced. Then Donald Trump is damn near assassinated. I mean, this is all happening in one 30-day cycle. Trump miraculously just gets grazed by a bullet. One person's killed, two seriously injured. And then we have what I'll call the palace coup, if you will. People were saying, well, Biden was going to be staying in the race, then he's not going to be in the race. Then that fateful Sunday, basically a week and a day after Trump had been shot, now all of a sudden Biden withdraws. He doesn't hold a press conference. He does it by a tweet effectively going out on X. So now here we are. People started saying, well, are they going to have an open convention? No, Jason, this was preordained. And I would like to get your thoughts on it because it almost too cute by half, setting it up to where now it's Vice President Kamala Harris. Biden is like nowhere to be found anymore. I know he was out doing a speech today, but I mean, does this all seem too orchestrated to you, Jason, or what am I missing here? Because if someone would have said you have a crystal ball, there's no way anybody could have predicted this 30 days ago.
Well, I don't think they could have predicted the scenarios, but let's go with some predictions out there from some mainliners. And I'm not about right or left, but in this regard, we got Tucker Carlson, I think 6 to 9 months, saying what? No matter what you think, the presidential race is not going to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Now, I want people to think about that for a moment, because if Trump gets shot in the head, it's certainly not him. And they never had an intention of running Joe Biden again. But I'll get to that. Vivek Ramaswamy said something very, very similar, that Joe Biden was not going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And of course, they were called conspiracy theorists, kooks, largely dismissed by the mainstream. But let's look at the Democratic Party for the last 3 election cycles. In 2016, there is little to no doubt that Bernie Sanders, had they followed the rules and not been completely and totally corrupt and then thrown the court cases out that tried to challenge that corruption, the old no standing argument in most cases, Bernie Sanders beats Hillary Clinton. For a party that screams and yells about democracy and the end of democracy and the threats of democracy, not a lot of democracy going on within their own party. So let's fast forward from 2016, when Hillary gets anointed, to 2020. The debate process was as such that Democrats that legitimately had a chance against Joe Biden, seeing he wasn't winning the debates, he wasn't dominating the primaries, what do? They step down at strategic moments to ensure 300 Joe, the baby record player dementia patient on stage, gets that nomination as well. I mean, again, you look how Elizabeth Warren left, Amy Klobuchar left, Pete Bootlicker left, and then becomes the transportation secretary. These are the types of quid pro quo that go on in big league politics. So you got selection 2016, you got selection 2020. Let's get into 2024. You have a viable Democratic candidate in RFK Jr. that has made it clear he is running for the presidency and has been embraced not only by many Democrats, but what? People in the middle, moderates. If you had a legitimate party that wanted to follow Democratic values, that guy would have at least been on the ballot to challenge Joe Biden. No mas, not going to happen. And therein lies the facade that Joe Biden was going to run for the presidency. They needed to take it along far enough so that the primary process had no debates and no challenge to the establishment. But at the end of the day, and it does seem like Biden went kicking and screaming, they knew they had to eliminate him. And that time came with the Trump debate. There's a reason they scheduled that debate so far out from the DNC, the Democratic National Convention. But I'll say this, I'm still in shock that Kamala Harris has been the one that was, in fact, endorsed. And I'll take it a little bit farther, Mark. You know, obviously, I believe that Trump assassination attempt, at least to the powers that shouldn't be, was supposed to be successful. Make no mistake, there's a chance even today that something similar could happen to Biden. Now, he's agreed to step down, but I also feel with this party, they want to feed the legitimacy of Kamala Harris. That's why I am a large proponent of, now that Joe has been exposed, let's leave him in office. Because if we were serious about invoking something like the 25th Amendment, you could have done that on day one. The guy clearly had dementia then. He hasn't run the country for this whole span of 4 years. If you think Kamala Harris has run anything in this country, again, I don't know that you're paying attention. You know, I would argue that if you go back to the second Bush administration, obviously guys like Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, they were running large parts of the country. I'd argue under the Barack Star administration that Joe Biden was not a do-nothing president. He also wasn't a guy like Mike Pence that was kind of just window dressing to be around. He was a corrupt gangster that knew the inner workings of this party and elitists around the globe. And that's why he was put there. But that's a stark contrast to what we saw with this administration. You go down the line, and quite frankly, there's only a few people out there that seem competent on any level. I would say Blinken is maybe one of them, right? I give no regards to Lloyd Austin or Milley. They're there as window dressing. I don't think that they're making any decisions. But Kamala Harris has made no decision other than the assistants to fire every other week and who her hairdresser is.
Well, and let me add a couple points to what you said there. And you bring up people that she fired. You know, her staff turned over 90% in the 3.5 years she's been vice president. And I think we have to stop for just a minute before we get into current polling. And folks, we're going to dive into that deep, so don't worry, you're not missing anything yet. But let's look back on how bad it got that they had to make this move. I mean, Joe Biden literally was hemorrhaging so bad that states like New Mexico, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Virginia. I mean, Donald Trump was leading in Virginia. He was leading in New Hampshire. He was within the margin of error in Minnesota and in New Mexico. Now, make no mistake about it. It wasn't just Joe Biden. These party leaders, Schumer, Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Barack Obama, they saw what was happening to down ballot Democrats. And, you know, this was the most predictable dam breaking that you could ever see, because it started with a slow ebb, you know, an obscure congressman here and there. Then it started picking up 2 or 3 a day, then 4, then 5. And, you know, news breaking today, Seymour Hersh had a column out today. We're not validating this column, so don't go to the bank on it. But Hirsch put out a column today that basically said on Saturday, the Saturday that Joe Biden the day before he stepped out on Sunday, that he had a conversation with Barack Obama on Saturday evening. It's a little murky when it took place. But basically, Obama told him in a short phone call that Vice President Harris was ready to invoke the 25th Amendment. I don't know if I'm buying that piece to it or not, but what I am buying is the fact that it was Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, who went on, I think it was Face the Nation on Sunday, talking about how, he had a meeting with Biden, would not get into it at all, what was said. Here's the guy who a week before was, I'm with Joe. What are you going to do about Biden? I'm with Joe. That's all they would say. And one thing about those Democrats, Jason, is you and I have talked about many times. They are lock, stop, together. They march to the same tune. Whenever the word comes out, all right, here's what we're going to do today, here's what we're going to talk about, they do it. So it was no surprise whatsoever that when Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, Barack Obama, and others were calling for this to happen, the only question was when it was going to happen. And obviously it happened a week ago on Sunday. So what happens after that point? And you were surprised that it became Harris right away. Well, it actually, in the prelude leading up to it, there were a lot of people saying, well, our choice is this. We're going to give it to Harris, whoever the we is, or we're going to have an open convention. Jim Clyburn, may as well put Clyburn in that group too. He was a big Biden supporter, but even Clyburn has said, well, maybe we'll have open convention. Bottom line was the Democrats wanted no part of an open convention. And as soon as Joe Biden came out and supported Vice President Harris, Jason, it was almost a reminder of what happened against Bernie Sanders in 2020 when Biden, I stepped out of lost New Hampshire, lost Iowa, lost Nevada, got killed in some of them. Only when Jim Clyburn stepped up and rallied around him in South Carolina did things change. But then they fell like dominoes. This just happened lightning fast. I mean, Jason, within 48 to 72 hours, about the only politician in America of stature that hadn't endorsed Kamala Harris was Barack and Michelle Obama. And that came, a day or two ago. In my opinion, the Obamas wanted to let the dust settle a little bit. They never want their fingerprints on any of this type stuff. And that's how I think this whole thing ended up coming down.
Well, let me say this. We went live on Sunday when this occurred, and General Michael Flynn joined that conversation. And I would have to agree with his assessment that the person that's truly pulling the strings, or at least the middle management guy, in other words, he takes the agenda from on top and then he delegates it to not only his own party, but those surrounding him with influence, Barack Obama. You look at that Sunday, and like you said, publicly, Barack Obama didn't come out for some time, but who did? The Clintons did. George Clooney did. If you don't think they got the call from the Barack star himself, I would say you're being pretty naive. Now, the big surprise to me, again, not only was it Kamala Harris, it's that they're not telling us who they're planning on running as a vice presidential candidate. Again, in our circles, Mark, and I know that you know this, so many people out there were sure it was going to be Michelle Obama, Roger Stone amongst them. But then you would talk to people who were on the inside of the administration, and they would say that Michelle Obama's taste for politics was a sour one, and she did not want to get into that mix. At the same time, there are reports out there, and I'd say they're probably correct, that the one person that Trump's campaign was legitimately afraid of would have been the cell of Michelle Obama. So I think that more than likely, you're going to see a lot of PR attempts to associate Michelle Obama with Kamala Harris. I wouldn't even put it past some kind of a short tour where Michelle is the opener and maybe Barack comes in every once in a while. He's there. You'll probably see Barack and Michelle at the DNC, but mark my words, whether Michelle Obama, and I don't think she's going to be chosen as the vice president, I think she's going to go full media hog for Kamala Harris and whoever they're running. And of course, they're really not running on those people, just like they weren't running on Joe Biden last time. They're running against Donald Trump and this imagination land image that they've tried to portray of him the last almost 8 years.
What do you make of the fact that every media outlet in the world is reporting that, the vice president has to pick a white male governor? And, there's been some names thrown about: Shapiro in Pennsylvania, you've Waltz of Minnesota, Andy Beshear, my original state of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, the governor of North Carolina, the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro. I mean, about 5 names have been thrown out there, Jason. We got about 30 seconds left before we're going to take a break. Any of those names appealing? Anything that you see out of those?
As far as what the media is saying, I'll say this before the break. I was on a plane back from New York just yesterday, and the woman was watching CNN on her phone. And you know what the headline on CNN was? Vice presidential candidate should be Jew or gay. Who cares about the qualifications? Either they're Jewish or they're gay and they get the nod. That is the dark cartoon we're living in at this moment, Mark.
Oh boy, you are so right about that. Paris Olympics be damned. Okay, listen, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to dive into what the real polling numbers are. Not all this Camelot stuff, but we're going to tell you what the race really stands. Be back in 90 seconds.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
And we're back. Folks, I do want to tell you one thing. Kirk Elliott has been a supporter of Patriot TV from the beginning. He runs an outstanding company. Gold and silver, put some of that in your portfolio. We're not giving you investment advice, but everyone should have a little bit of that just to protect yourself as these crazy times are around us. All right, Jason, listen. Real polling numbers, I want to dive into those right now. You and I had some conversations in the pre-warm-up, before we came on live on air. And let me give you some real numbers, folks. Right now, despite all of the glowing praise, it's Barack Obama-ish almost, reminded me of what happened in 2008, the pillars in Denver. I mean, the media has been so over the top in hyping what a person has done running for president who has never gotten a single vote. and never has even got a delegate running for election. So let me give you where the numbers are right now, and then we're going to put some analysis into it. This is a Real Clear Politics average. Why do we use Real Clear Politics? Because it's been amazingly accurate over the decade, and Real Clear Politics puts together an average of polls. Now, again, don't ever take one poll and say, oh, this is it. New York Times said this, Siena said that. No, don't do that, because some polls measure registered voters, others are likely voters, and you really want to take a good sample. But as of today, Donald Trump is at 47.9%. Kamala Harris is at 46.2%. Now, you can see the map up there. Now, what does that translate into? Well, before we took the break, we talked about how Joe Biden was hemorrhaging votes. Take a look at that map there. It shows you the red states, the blue states, and we've highlighted 3 states. No surprise, folks. Again, this is our opinion. We're cutting through all the BS. Pennsylvania, prior to Kamala Harris coming on board, Donald Trump was leading Pennsylvania by about 2 points. That's not the case anymore. Pennsylvania, some polls have Trump up by 1, some have her up by 1. Aggregately, Donald Trump has a slight lead in Pennsylvania. So I'm looking at it like this. I'm saying, look, if I have a race and it's less than 2% margin, because most of the polling you're going to see has a margin of error of plus or minus 2 to 3%. Now, some of them, we'll talk about this a little bit later, they have big sampling sizes. That margin of error may be 1 to 2%. But aggregately, Pennsylvania right now, it's less than a 2%. So that's why we've got it in the toss-up category. Michigan, similar type situation. There were polls when Joe Biden was the nominee. There were polls showing Donald Trump anywhere from 1 to 3 points in Michigan. Now, that hasn't moved a lot, but it did come down. Most polls are now showing Donald Trump with about a 1-point lead in Michigan. A la, just like Pennsylvania, 1-point lead in Pennsylvania. That's why we've got this as a toss-up state. Wisconsin, I've seen 2 or 3 polls. One of them, Kamala Harris up by ½ point, Trump up by 1, a couple of them tied. Wisconsin literally is a toss-up. It's going to come down to a few different counties in Wisconsin. So now, what about the other swing states? The media is trying to tell you, oh, no, wait a minute. Georgia, that's going to be really competitive, and it might be. We're going to get into that. Nevada, well, when Biden was in there, Trump was leading in Nevada by 7 points. He was leading in Georgia by 6. Okay, Arizona by 5. These are like sort of outside the margin of error. So we haven't had solid polling since then on those particular states. We've seen some anecdotal movement that it may be tightening, but nothing definitive yet. So as we see it right now, Jason, the map is, and if you could put that map back up for just a second, you've got electoral votes on this map right now. Vice President Harris, 226. President Trump, 268. 44 votes toss-up. What does that mean? Well, you have to have 270 to win. So look at that number with Donald Trump, 268. He's very close. What does that tell you? It tells you if this current map held as we have it right now, he would only need to win 1 of those 3 blue wall states. So Jason, back to you. With that sort of as the backdrop, where Biden was to where Harris is now, give me your analysis in looking at that map. Am I being a little conservative here with Donald Trump? Or in your view, does Trump have to sort of run up the score to make sure he can win it?
Well, I do believe he has to run up the score. I'm not so sold on the free and fair elections idea. But before I even get there, let's talk about what you said in the very beginning about the media push on Kamala Harris. It is absolutely there, but I'm not sure it's going to be able to work in the manner it did with Barack Obama. Remember, the sell on Barack Obama was the first black president. And despite all of his faults, I will always give the man that he is well-spoken, extremely charismatic, and very calculated in his response and political relationships. In my mind, what I've seen of Harris the last 4 years, she is absolutely none of those things. And I would also like to establish that the push for Barack Obama came before he even won his first Senate seat. He was the keynote speaker in 2004, and they were able to reach the young culture. I'd argue right now, Trump is reaching the young culture more than ever, with people like 50 Cent putting his face on the cover of his albums as he sings Many Men. Kamala Harris does not have that. Barack Obama had covers on the Rolling Stone. Malls were still hopping in America all the way back in 2008. You couldn't go past one of the Urban Outfitters or hip hop stores without iconic shirts of that man. I don't think she's going to get that push. Now let's look at those states. Pennsylvania in particular is problematic because you have both Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So you at least have the appearance that there is a possibility that Trump could lose there, because I can assure you on the East Coast, in that region, people that live outside of cities largely are aboard by what the Democratic Party has done to this country in the last 4 years. They're struggling with the gas prices. They're struggling with the inflation, not only on food, but their gas and oil, which has gone through the roof. So Pennsylvania is really one of those key components, but will they be able to go beyond the cities? Let's look at Michigan. Michigan, a lot of people don't understand that they have the largest Muslim population in the United States. Now, why do I bring that in as a factor? Kamala Harris has largely remained silent on what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and I do believe the Muslim populace there believes that the status quo will continue under her administration. In other words, no end in sight to this war. Love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, he is a guy that gets things done, and I have not loved all of his Israeli policy in the past, but he has been very, very open with the fact that he is going to try to stop that conflict before he gets into office. I believe that could be a large play on Muslim voters. They want that conflict to stop. That doesn't mean that Palestine is going to get statehood. That doesn't mean necessarily, all of their wishes are going to be met, but it could mean an end to the excessive amount of violence that we're seeing every single day. So I think that Michigan is probably the place where Trump wants to utilize most and utilize that anti-war message, because if he's able to get that state, he can forget about the other two. Wisconsin, kind of a mystery to me. You would think in the Midwest that would be a no-brainer for Trump. But I'll say it again, I'm skeptical of all these polls. If I had my way, Mark, we'd be doing polling outside of Walmarts in middle America all throughout the country as people get in. In fact, I might start doing that as my man on the street, just going out there, every single person, Biden or Trump, Biden or Trump. I'm going to say you do something like that, it's going to be 60-40 Trump, easy on average, if not 75-25. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a dumb guy on the streets, Mark.
Well, let me agree with virtually everything you just said. I hate to, to do that all the time, but I think if you go through the states that you just did, when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, he won Pennsylvania by it was like right at 1 point. When he lost it by about a point. Okay. Remember the infamous, we found 600,000 votes that we hadn't counted yet. And a big chunk of those went to Joe Biden. Anyway, so Pennsylvania plus 1% when he won, minus 1% when he lost. Go over to Michigan. And now, let me hold one other comment on Pennsylvania. I think Trump will actually poll better in Pennsylvania. I think he has a better chance of winning Pennsylvania than maybe even Michigan and Wisconsin. Michigan and Pennsylvania, I think, are about equal. And here's why. Vice President Harris has come out and, again, in speech after speech, Green New Deal against fracking. Yeah, you have Pittsburgh and you have Philadelphia, but I think it was James Carville used to call it, the Clinton strategist. Yeah, it's like a T, where you have Pittsburgh, you have Philadelphia, and you have the whole rest of the state. But fracking is a big deal. And I'm having a hard time imagining that a San Francisco liberal, and folks, make no mistake about it, you're going to hear that term over and over and over, a la Michael Dukakis, Massachusetts liberal. Kamala Harris' voting record is to the left of Bernie Sanders. I was shocked to find that out. I did not believe that could be the case. But her and Bernie Sanders are right there together. You go to the people in rural Pennsylvania and tell them that you're going to against fracking. Again, polls in Pennsylvania are very tight. That the former conservative, now liberal morning Joe host Joe Scarborough used to call Pennsylvania fool's gold for Republicans. Well, it was fool's gold until Donald Trump won it, and then fool's gold when he lost it. So Pennsylvania, again, could go either way. You mentioned the situation in Michigan. What is she going to do? Is she going to go hardcore left to try to appease the Hamas wing, the terrorist wing of the Democratic Party? Can she risk losing what I'll call the left for the far left? I don't know. That's a pretty tough political maneuver she's going to have to figure out. And you mentioned Wisconsin. What? Trump won it by a couple 10, 20,000 votes, lost it by 13,000, 10,000 votes. So Wisconsin's been literally tenths of percentages on both 2016 and 2020. But so again, I think map-wise, legitimately, those are reasons to put them in play. Now, Jason, here's a little nugget that the media's tried to spin lately, and there could be some truth to this. Kamala Harris is picking up younger voters and what they call voters of color at a little bit higher percent than Joe Biden was. But that is being offset by older voters who were going for Biden over Trump, who now are saying, wait a second here. I may not agree with his statements or his mannerisms, but his policies were pretty damn good. And older voters are tending to lean towards Trump. So you have an interesting dynamic, Jason. One other point, and this is not going to surprise anyone, and like, Mark, you're the master of the obvious here. More women voters are leaning towards Vice President Harris. More men are leaning towards former President Trump. And it's like the opposite reaction. More men do not like Kamala Harris and more women don't like Trump. So again, that's offsetting each other. So Jason, you have a lot at play here just in these three states, to where the man-woman issue, the minority piece, then you have just this incredible dynamic of the Democrats are so thankful that Joe Biden is not in the race anymore. So I really think that the polling piece here is dynamic, which is why we want to cut through it, folks. And if you just listen to mainstream media, you would think this race is over. She's been coronated. Why even have the convention? Let's just give her the presidency right now. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to take our 90-second break, but when we come back, we're going to dive into the rest of the country and other opportunities and some things that both Trump and Harris have been saying on the campaign trail. Be back shortly.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to talk about a limited time offer of subscriptions to Patriot.tv and how you can become a member of our Patriot Defenders subscription club and become a member of Patriot.tv. Really, it's America's network. I call it the home of truth. And you can do that for only $9.99 a month. It's a great deal by itself, but what I'm going to walk you through here in these next few seconds is a couple of package deals that we have that are unbelievable. The next membership was the annual membership at $99 that you can save. Right away, you save $20 if you come in at the annual subscription rate. The best deal that I think that people ought to seriously consider is the 2-year membership at $159. And it includes a special edition of my recently released documentary, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. So along with the 2-year membership, the 2-year subscription will send you a DVD combo of the film, plus an option to stream the movie online, as well as exclusive interviews of Tucker Carlson, Devin Nunes, and myself. So go to the home of truth, right? Go to patriot.tv today, sign up, seriously consider the 2-year subscription rate. It's an unbelievable savings. I think it's a total savings of about $70 from just signing up on a monthly or a annual basis. So thank you very much for your support. Patriot.tv is America's new network. Thank you.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold.
Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
And we're back. Hey, folks, click that Patriot Defenders box. General Flynn is right. We really like your support. You're going to get straight shooting news like this, great commentary from people like Jason, Joe Pags, Sam Sorbo, Will Johnson, many others. So click on that Patriot Defender box, become a member. We got some great content for you. All right, Jason, back to aggregately what's happening in this race right now. And I'm going to sort of tie up a comment you said earlier. There's like important things, reasons why people are voting for Donald Trump. The economy, inflation, and the border. Trump has huge advantages on all those. Given how poor the Biden record is, what's Kamala Harris running on? Well, easy to figure out. Reproductive rights, saving democracy, and a new issue has run up that she is taking advantage of. It's not Joe Biden running. And I mean, when I put those 3 issues out there, I'm saying, damn, I said, what's really important to most Americans? Well, as you and I have talked on many occasions, most of the time it's about the economy. But Jason, she is having some traction on this democracy issue. I'm not Joe Biden, I'm a fresh face. And of course, you know, the traditional reproductive. What are your thoughts on the issues here? And is it an issues-related campaign that's going to put one over the other, or is it a personality campaign?
Well, I don't think it's either. I think it's an identity politics campaign, right? She's already portrayed herself as the woman of color. I mentioned that CNN piece where literally the headline was, should she pick a Jew or a gay? And then on the bottom, because women can be both Jewish and gay, shocking, I know, should it be an all-female ticket? None of this speaks to the heart of any issue. Hey, give me a Jewish person. I don't care as long as they're in line with my values, beliefs, and they can do the job. Same thing with a gay woman. I don't care. Honestly, please put somebody that's capable in there. That's not what she's running on. And you mentioned the economy. I think that one of the things they're going to try to spin is that she's going to clean house and fix what has been done in the economy. In fact, some of the headlines that I have read, we mentioned the fact that she has a 90% turnover rate in her staff, but they're saying that basically the vast majority of this administration is gone. And I think that's a calculated move to give the idea of a clean slate. At the end of the day, Mark, the economy is usually the issue. And you mentioned fracking. Right now, New York is a serious battleground state, and it is being treated as such with Trump, making appearances in the city, having rallies there. There's a large portion of that state that wants nothing to do with those city politics. And as people know, I'm an upstate New York guy. I was in central New York, about 80 miles away from the border, but close enough to counties like Franklin County that were extremely upset that they were not getting the deals that those in Pennsylvania were for their land for fracking as it was banned. In fact, for some time period, I had individuals trying to get those pipelines running and paying millions of dollars for land that maybe was valued in the six-figure range prior to them finding natural gas. So if Trump can come in there and start talking about that aspect in particular in the Northeast, that makes New York much more viable. And again, he's got an issue-based campaign. I have yet to see anything but, vapidness coming from Kamala Harris in the realm of identity politics and really leftist talking points. Because at the end of the day, when we are talking about reproductive rights, personally, in my life, it was never my hill to stand on. Would I want an abortion in my life? No way. When I look at it as an issue, it should absolutely be left up to the states when you get in a situation that abortion has been pushed into the realm of 6 months, 7 months, 9 months, and then having governors on the left, of course, talking about making the baby feel comfortable after being born before it's euthanized and referencing that as abortion. I think that pushed so many people, even on the left, away from that party, yet the narrative is otherwise. So I think they're going to continue to push those narratives, push those talking points. Earlier, just before the broadcast, I was watching Biden in his speech in Austin. It seems like he's really going for it and is going to somehow attempt to pack the Supreme Court via a constitutional amendment. But the truth of the matter is, Mark, and you know this, there will be no constitutional amendments of any kind rightfully passed by this administration because it's not a 51-49 vote. Our founding fathers were extremely intelligent and realized to amend the Constitution that really protects the individual, all of us, all of humanity in this country. You need a vast majority. You need 2/3. And obviously, that's not there. So what I'm really fearing is right now, possible executive orders taking place before Harris may be installed before the election to give her legitimacy. So in other words, when you're running this identity politics racket, you put her in for even a month and a half before the election, and the right crisis happens, well, she could run on that as well. And then you have legitimized her. That's a scary proposition, Mark.
Well, let me address that because I'm going to go back to the piece after Barack Obama, Schumer, Pelosi, et al. Got Biden to agree to step aside. The accolades that came out about Joe Biden, who you and I both know, and the vast majority of Americans, is really incompetent at this stage, okay? 90% of the American people, 90, did not want him to stay in the race. So this accolades that, my God, Joe fell on the sword. What a great American. He put his personal ambitions aside for the good of the Democratic Party. That is all a lie, folks. There's not 1 ounce of truth to all that garbage you were hearing from all these Democratic acolytes that came on various media outlets praising Joe Biden. This man was kicking and screaming, and he didn't want to go anywhere. And if you think about it from Joe Biden's perspective, Jason, the man, it took him 3 tries to get to the presidency. But since he was 29 years old, on a senatorial election, he had never lost. Okay. So he's thinking, I can come back from this, I can come back from it, no matter how delusionary that was. I mean, you take a man who arguably has some form of dementia, throw in the legendary Biden stubbornness in there, and the man didn't want to go. So, I mean, he was clearly compromised. You and I both know there's not a snowball's chance this thing with the Supreme Court is going anywhere. But I think to try to get Biden to save a little face, they got to do something with him. They just can't leave him holed up in the White House. So he may go out there and make a few speeches. Look at his executive orders have basically, most of them have been shot down. Look what he tried to do on student loans. Tried to every which way from Sunday to get those things relieved. At the end, most of them got overturned by the court system. So, what they're going to do with Joe Biden, I haven't heard one Democrat, not one, say they want to see Joe Biden out on the campaign trail with Kamala Harris. I mean, I would be really surprised. Will he make an appearance at the convention? Who knows? But going down your theme, I think if he was put out to pasture, which is a polite way of saying, well, we really may have to invoke the 25th Amendment here, or his mental faculties really declined rapidly prior to the election, would it shock me to see her become President Harris prior to the election? No, wouldn't shock me at all. Now, we don't know what type of backroom deal was cut by Barack Obama. We just don't know that. But going back to what you said about General Flynn, when he came on, the program when we did the special report, and I asked him, I said, General, who's running this country right now? He didn't even flinch a second. He said, Barack Obama. So when you have a situation now where Barack Obama is calling the shots and he's got his, quote, favorite candidate, Kamala Harris, other than his wife, that's at the top of the ticket, the question will be, okay, what are we going to do with Joe now? I bet they just try to keep him a speech here, a speech there every now and then, but I don't think they're going to have him out on the campaign trail with her. His speaking role at the convention will be limited, if at all. Maybe they'll find some other medical condition for him. But you know who will be the stars at that Democratic convention, besides Kamala Harris, will be Barack and Michelle Obama, and whichever person they pick for the vice presidency piece. So, no, this thing has a long way to go. The thing that, to tie in the identity politics thing, I mean, I can tell by just the tone of your voice, it really galls you to see that one of our major political parties has gotten so low to the point where everything is identity politics. I'm sort of in your camp. Okay, if they think Pete Buttigieg is the best person to be VP, it should be because he's Pete Buttigieg, not because he's gay and he's Pete Buttigieg. Full disclosure, my sister works for Pete Buttigieg. So, I couldn't care less what his orientation is. But that's not how the Democratic Party feels. Similarly, all these people talking about, well, she has to have a white guy as the vice president. Why? What does it have to be a white governor? Well, we have to, what they're really telling you, Jason, is, well, we know we have a San Francisco liberal woman of South Asian descent on the ticket. We got to balance that out because, we're the party of identity politics and we just have to do this. And, oh, by the way, we will make amends with the Hamas terrorist wing of the Democratic Party. Jason, it's no surprise. Right now, the Democrats make up 25 to 26% of the voting population. Republicans are about the same. Guess where half the country is? They're in your neck of the woods. They are not a declared Democrat or Republican. They're independent. So I pose it back to you. I know that Kamala Harris is getting 93% of the Democratic vote. That's as of today. Donald Trump is getting 93% of the Republican vote as of today. I see nothing that's going to change those numbers. Point here, point there, maybe. But Jason, the real test is going to be with the independent voters, and how they break is who's going to win this election.
Well, I think the independent voters are like myself. They want to believe that they still live in a system that is somewhat of a meritocracy. In other words, look, you're going to have cronyism. You're going to have nepotism. You're going to have all sorts of corruption when you get into these high-level political arenas. But at the end of the day, we want to know that people that are capable can make their way to the top. Look, love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, he stepped into the highest level of politics with zero experience and exposed so much of that system of corruption over the last 8 to 9 years. I don't think that Kamala Harris can come close to any of that. So many people already look at her as a quote unquote diversity hire, but the party itself is not shying away from that term. In fact, some of that speech I caught today by Biden when he was invoking his warnings against Project 2025. It's like, Forget about, Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030 or all these other white papers. The Republicans put out a plan which isn't really individualized. We're going to attack that. And what did he say? They want to eviscerate DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in almost every realm. Yeah, because it's not about diversity, equity, or inclusion. If it was about true diversity, it would be the diversity of ideas. If it was about equity, or what should be equality, you would have representation of those ideas, and then the American people would decide on those ideas based on the people they elect. If you want true inclusion in this country, it starts with the American citizens themselves, but they try to subvert and divert that by talking about not just people of color, but renaming illegal immigrants as migrants. And basically, we have Republicans right now. It's not just Republicans, it's people like myself that think if two people who are not citizens come into this country illegally and have a child here, they're not an automatic citizen. Joe Biden, again, is using that as a talking point. I think that when you talk about these issues, I have not seen anybody better at weaseling through them and giving an era of legitimacy to them than Gavin Newsom. And that's why I'm very worried about a Newsom possibly being that vice presidential candidate. But at the same time, hey, he's not Jewish, he's not gay, he's not a man or woman of color, so they might not be able to fit him in. So really, when you look at this DEI and identity politics, who's it really hurting, Mark? It's hurting the Democratic Party.
Well, I think at the end of the day it will, but ultimately, as we said at the beginning of our show today, they can put voters into classes, which they do, and it's classic identity politics. But sometimes when you do that, Jason, things don't necessarily go the right way. I mean, we've seen early reports that they may consider playing in other states, for example. I've already seen reports out, there's younger voters, there's more highly educated voters in Arizona, Nevada, and there's more African-American voters in Georgia. Okay, they may go down that path and say, well, this is where we're going to focus on. Well, guess what? You go down that path, and then you lose Pennsylvania, you lose Michigan, you lose Wisconsin. I mean, it's going to be fascinating as we go through this, Jason, because there are so many ebbs and flows behind it, between the fact that 1/3, this is a shocking number, but I'm going to give it to you, folks. 1/3 of Democratic voters actually wanted Trump to get killed when the bullet missed him. I mean, how sick is that? And someone asked me the other night, they said, well, Mark, what happens if Trump wins? Are there going to be protests? I said, protests? Woo-hoo-hoo. You are going to see protests alike you have never seen. Remember when he got inaugurated the first time, all those women were marching through, not just women, men, leftists, radicals, not my president. And so I said, yeah, you're going to have protests all over the place during the entire time that Trump's president. He goes, well, what happens if Harris wins? I said, depends on how it goes. Was it a straightforward election? Were all the votes counted? What are the margins? But our side is not likely to invoke the same type of protest as the other side. But again, this is all speculation. We got a lot of time to sort out through this. All right, Jason, we got about a minute or two left here. State of the races, we have it right now. One thing we haven't talked about, but I'm going to throw this red meat out there for all of our audience, for all the talk you've seen. Kamala, wonderful, this just glowing, fabulous remarks. In the 9 swing states, Donald Trump is currently leading in 7. She's leading in 1, and the other's tied. So if the election were held today, which it's not, Donald Trump would become the 47th president. Jason, about a minute left. How do you see that state right now, and where do you see us going from here?
It's tough to call. I think it's going to depend on how well the Democratic Party really tries to sell Kamala Harris. And, I don't necessarily think they're going to do it through traditional politicians. I really think they're going to ramp up the Holly weirdos. You talked about some of the people that you expect to speak at the DNC. I expect George Clooney to be there, and I expect some other surprise politicians, especially after the RNC, Hulk Hogan, Kid Rock, Dana White, and really a dominating performance from Donald Trump. But things are starting to heat up. I think we're going to have a better look after the DNC of the political landscape, but all that could just blow up in our faces with the right crisis in this country, or God forbid, overseas, that sparks a possibility of World War III, my friend.
Well, that could happen. And think about this. Okay, our current president right now, who is declining before our eyes, but he's still the president. And they have not invoked the 25th Amendment. And despite the fact that, and I believe you're correct on this, if she did become president prior to the election, and again, folks, we don't have election day anymore. We have election season. It sort of starts at the end of September, 1st of October, and goes on for like 6 weeks. But imagine that. I mean, if we did have a world crisis right in the middle of election going on, I mean, who's calling the shots? Is it going to be President Biden? Is it going to be Barack Obama? Likely, given direction what's happening. Or do the Democratic parties look at the polls? And again, Joe Biden was forced out of this race because of horrific polling numbers. Don't kid yourself. The reason they got him out was they saw down ballot disasters. So Jason, let's fast forward to the scenario you're talking about here. We have a major event happening somewhere across the globe. Oh, Mark, by the way, they launched rockets into Israel and killed 12 kids playing on a soccer field. And now there's talk about an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. So, I mean, could that happen? You're damn right it could happen. So, as we think about this, we come into, let's say, October. The infamous October surprise happens every year. Happened with Hillary Clinton in the tapes, happened with Donald Trump and getting off that bus, and who didn't really have an October surprise with Joe Biden because he was hidden in the basement. But imagine that. We have something come up, and then you have to ask yourself a question. What if the polling numbers in October show President Trump up outside the margin of error? You know damn good and well the Democrats will say, Joe, we got to do something. Exit stage left, President Harris. I would predict that would happen if those polling numbers do not show this race as tight as I think it is. Am I on the right path, the wrong path, conspiracy theory, or am I hitting it right down the middle?
I think you might be hitting it right down the middle. You talked about possible unrest. I think civil unrest is an absolute guarantee if Trump is voted in. I'm as nervous from November to January when he gets sworn in as I am for this election. So yes, Mark, I've been saying it. You legitimize this woman. You have the right crisis. I don't believe we have free and fair elections. We certainly weren't able to audit the 2021 successfully. So all bets are off. They may be able to install this woman, and God knows what happens with this country if, in fact, that happens.
Well, I want to thank you, Jason Bermas, for the inaugural show of Election Edge. You're going to be back as my guest many times on this show. And folks, I hope you enjoyed our debut show. We're going to be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to really dive into the analytics of the day, just like we did today, giving it to you straight what's happening. But thank you for watching the show. Joe Pags is next. We'll see you tomorrow, 6 Eastern, 3 West Coast time.